So hello, my name is Daniel, and welcome to this little update from Kendraio. I'm just going to take you through a few things that we've been up to. Most of them are half done, and I don't have any problem with that. It's just, we're just experimenting. I think there's lots of ways into where we are now, and not all of them were actually the motivation for how we got here, but are kind of like have fallen out as opportunities because we are where we're at. So just very briefly, we've been looking at interoperability for about, I don't know, 26 years. Oh my God. And then we decided to build a demonstration of what that might look like about 5 years ago. And since then, we've kind of been building little models of what's turned into an app rather than a service. And we didn't really know that this is how it was going to end up. But what we're kind of thinking is that perhaps that what we've built is better than having a world of interoperability and open protocols. And I may or may not go into that. But we'll, as I say, there's kind of lots of levels to talk about this on, but really I just want to show you the kind of practical where we've got to, and then we can all think about the wild fantasies beyond that. So I think if you feel I've missed anything, yeah, just, like I said, just raise your hand, but I'm just going to start showing you stuff.
Better, but not superseding, I would add.
Sorry?
Better than open protocols, perhaps, but not superseding.
Yeah, that's like we can talk about that. Liam is joining us. Hi, Liam. We're recording this, so welcome. And I'm just about to start sharing my screen. Share screen. Okay, here we go. Yeah, here we go. So I quickly cobbled together a bunch of things that I can show you. When you go to the app, it's actually in a browser, app.kendra.io. We're building it using Angular. So it's kind of web stack technology. So what's nice about that is we can build it we can deliver it over the web, and we can also wrap it up in something like Electron and then actually deliver it as a normal app. And we're also looking at how can we have it on a mobile, and how can we have it headless. And you'll figure out why we might want to do that in a sec. So this is the rather confusing screen you see when you land on that. And I'd say something to be aware of as you pass through the screens is the cog, this configuration. Basically, this is how this screen is generated. And in the main, you can play with the configuration of the screen within the screen. So we go to, it's the temp, here it is. So I'm going to mess with this. I'm going to go and I'm going to update that and it's going to change it. So the idea behind this app is that the user is in control of the interface totally. That's that's kind of a slight philosophical shift. Can't even say it. And that actually arrived, I think, if I can remember, it's like quite difficult to remember why we made these decisions, but we decided we wanted to have a kind of a low code, no code environment to be able to quickly and rapidly demonstrate different pieces of functionality without having to go back into the code all the time. And then we realized, wow, this is actually really interesting for individual users. I want to be able to manipulate my interface as a user, not just as a developer. Because we see these environments of low code, no code quite a lot in app development, and you've got these lovely services that allow you to do this with a pricing structure, and then at the end result is an app you then can wrap up and distribute via the web stores. But what I've been thinking in my head quite a lot, I'm just going to digress for a second, is I used to program when I was a teenager in BASIC. And I asked my brother, who's 5 years older than me, did you ever program in BASIC? And what came out was he was just too old to do computer study. You know, like computer studies wasn't an option when he was passing through the early stages of secondary school. And I suspect that there's quite a little gap of people, of teenagers at that point, or kids at that point, that were playing with computers at that level. Because then, and it does feel that by the time email came along, BASIC wasn't really around. The idea of being able to create something and save it to a disk or tape cassette or print it out and then give it to a friend to play with didn't exist. But if it had, and I might be totally wrong about this, but if it had, maybe we would have been emailing BASIC programs to each other. But anyway, that's I digress. Right. So in order to find stuff, okay, discard changes, yes. You go to the funny hamburger there, and not this hamburger. You're then given a list of potential flows that you can launch. So what this is looking at is a cloud. It's a database, a remote database. It's not local to my machine, where we basically share flows with each other. This wasn't our first option, but it has become kind of a de facto easy thing to rapidly build things collaboratively. And so we're building a collaborative development environment for flows, which is also pretty nuts when you start to think about it. And all of these things have implications as we dive deeper into them in terms of how quickly things can proliferate and morph. Anyway, I'm going to take you through some examples. Okay, so that's how you'd find, and then you would type in clips, for instance, and it would find all the flows that had clips in them, and then you'd launch that. And so this is this is for Guy and George, who used to work on Kendraio Hub, and we started modeling how that world of rights might work in kind of this kind of environment. And we didn't get as far as we did with Kendraio Hub, I must admit. That was those kind of algorithms. We didn't, but we kind of started looking at that. And again, this is kind of local to me, and that's even though I've got this via, it's a PWA, so I've got this via the web browser, and then it's running locally on my machine, and that actually became quite an important point when we're dealing with rights holders. Maybe they don't want to put their data into the cloud. Maybe they don't trust the service providers, and we found that with a number of individuals and also quite big industry bodies, that they want to have total control over where their data is, and so sometimes a cloud service is not for them. Okay, 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 so let's and then what I can do with this, and this is just playing around, but just to give you some comfort, and then this kind of reminds me of what we did with Kendraio Hub.
Yeah, very nice interface.
Yeah. So beyond that, okay, so let's go to, we're integrating with Bandsintown. Bandsintown is quite a big gig site, and you can go to Bandsintown directly and use their interface, or you can have some functionality with what we're doing here. In fact, I'm going to show you Bandsintown this way, if I can find it. So if I want to add an event, we've got you select an artist, and because I'm logged in as patient pacifist, that's why that comes up. But finding a venue name will search their database. So it's plugging into their database live, and so we're basically going through the API. And what this means ultimately, the way we start is we first of all pretty much mimic what they provide through their website within the Kendraio app. And then the idea is from that, we'll be able to start mashing up, because the mashing up data with other services or systems. So I want to be in control of my gig list. I want to then send it out to maybe Bandsintown or Facebook or Google or wherever. I don't want to have to copy, don't want to have to log into each individual website and copy the data again and again. So this is really a time-saving tool. That's the whole point about it. But it's also so that's how it started. This started as an admin tool for musicians and managers and record labels to manage their data on all these multiple places, because it's like doing their heads in, because it's also complicated transferring it across, and they all have different formats. So there's no standardization here. So, but what we found when we started building that was, yeah, well, why don't I hold the main data personally and then send it out with one button to all of these places? So we're modeling that idea, and I'm giving you examples of where we've crept into that environment. I don't think we've achieved it totally with any service that we're building or integrating with, and that's partly because and it's also wonderful that they're all different. They all have different methodologies. All their APIs are esoteric and proprietary, and they all do things in different ways, and they send out errors in different ways, and sometimes they don't send out errors at all. And that's just one example. But so what we have to do is then harmonize that way of representing those services within this admittedly more simplified interface. And that's part of the reason. I want it for myself. I want a more simple interface. Okay, this is making sense so far. Is this good? This is good. Yep. Okay. So if we go, okay, so also another part of the Bandsintown functionalities, I can look at what I've done in the past. So I had a gig, a local gig. Yeah, there we go. So I'll edit that. And that's, in actual fact, we need to make this better. I'm just going to say that across the board, we need to make all of these flows better. But that's, so the idea is that I'll be able to publish things and edit things. Yeah, Guy.
So does it submit to the service as well, or does it just retrieve data?
It actually really does submit.
Okay, cool.
Where we're going to have to upgrade what we're doing is in editing, but we really can submit.
And of course, it then submits your set list to PRS, so you can get paid for it.
That's the whole point. If you are then in control of your data, yeah, you fire it off to PRS. And the nice thing about that is PRS probably need that in a different format, and they probably might even need it in an Excel spreadsheet. So we've actually done quite a lot of work with, in fact, most PROs, CMOs around the world want it in a spreadsheet, ironically, but they're all in different formats. So we've had to get all the different formats of all the different spreadsheets for all the different CMOs and PROs and transform the data in a standard database that we have for well, the artist has for all their repertoire, and then map it to these different, and again, that work got us, we did it for Sound Exchange in the US, and that was, it worked quite well as a first step, because you then have to go through and validate a lot of the data, but you can only do that with the website. There's no methodology, even uploading a spreadsheet or whatever. So what's interesting a lot with all of this stuff is technologists and services don't sometimes build services or technology to help people do this. But what we found is this is kind of, it's incremental. It's not big enough to charge a lot of money for, and it's too small to, so people end up just cobbling together their own spreadsheet things, or they just end up doing it, employing another person. And I reckon that's happening a lot. And there's not that much tooling. There's tooling for the big enterprises and the big record labels, or they're doing it themselves. But in terms of the smaller medium, I think there's a lot of opportunity to provide kind of tooling that kind of works, that makes things a little bit better. There you go. Okay, I'm going to jump sector. I'm going to go into shopping. During the pandemic, we things were a bit messed up, and you had to shop by email or by online. And our local organic store did it by email. So we built a, but basically, you literally had to send them an email of your shopping list and they would prepare it for you. But there wasn't any nice mechanism of doing that. So we basically threw this together. And I'm just going to show you it. So basically, you would select a few things. They come up in your shopping list here. You change the quantities, and then you recalculate it, and it gives you something you can copy into an email. It's pretty old school, but it would have worked for that scenario. But there's a few things that's interesting about this particular thing, is that this is basic technology. It's not super complicated, and but it's something that we do time and time again. We're selecting things, we're putting them into a list, we're qualifying them maybe a little bit, and then we're actioning them. And what we found actually on the web, in our lives, that's kind of what we do. We select objects, we edit objects, we delete objects, and we list them, we filter them, we graph them. There's not that much stuff that we do with these objects. And I guess the fantasy is, if we can create nice slick interfaces to manage those interactions with human beings, then we've covered a lot of use cases of the world, like shopping in a big shopping system. I'm not going to mention their name, but you select things, you take them to the cart, and you do it. And then other shopping systems, you're just doing exactly the same thing, but you have to go to different interfaces and different experiences. And for some people, that's really confusing. And why don't we just have one interface? And it's not, and I mean, why don't I just have one interface? And why don't you just have one interface? You can choose whatever you want, and I can choose whatever I want. they might be totally different. I think each individual might decide to have it their own way, but when we started building this, it was like, my fantasy is now I can have my own shopping systems that plug into all of the major big sites, plus it can go direct to as many as I want, because actually most of them have APIs. And that's kind of that's interesting too. Okay, during COVID, we built a COVID dashboard. So a lot of the dashboarding systems out there are one way. A lot of Google Dashboard, Microsoft Power BI, all of those kind of services generally, plug in all of your enterprise data into this one dashboard and then have lots of dials and graphs. It's not really bi-directional. And so we are. That's the whole point of what we're doing. So during COVID, we didn't do a bi-directional thing. We did just a read only. And unfortunately, a lot of the data's stopped being pumped out now. So we're going to have to kind of fix this with old data. But I'm going to show you the article we wrote, and then I'll show you the actual thing. But basically, let's see. Yeah, these are a few of the graphs that we could build from the data, and you can go and read this article and understand more. But this is the current this is the current dashboard. There's nothing here. The one thing that is functional is I've isolated out the by country graph, and that still does poll various countries, and I don't know what is there must be there's an end point here that we're pointing at to go get the data. That's where it is. See, that's the API request, or it's a very basic API. It's just HTTP. But okay, what next? I'm going to show you YouTube. It's broken at the moment, but I'm still going to show you it, because the idea is that you would connect into your admin account on YouTube. You would list all your videos, and then you would be able to edit the titles and the snippets, the thumbnails, and the description via this. Again, this is like, well, if I can upload a video to YouTube, can I do it to Vimeo and to other video sites with one button? And I put in the description. And the interesting thing is, so there are programs out there that do that. There are or they're either services or programs that allow you to do that. There are programs out there, there are apps, I guess I should say, that allow you to track all of your parcels that are coming to you in one app, on one dashboard, no matter if it's no matter which courier service it is. And there are other apps that allow you to look at all your bank accounts in one app, and via open banking protocols and stuff like that. So all of these apps, all of these kind of metaphors, these functions exist individually, but by being in individual apps, the user, I can't get at that data and manipulate it, and I can't then twist it around and then send it out again in a different form. But with what we're doing, I've got that functionality. I can aggregate that information. I can then take that information in its raw essence. I can then put algorithms or filters on them, and I can then throw them out into other areas. So what's interesting is what I guess why I was very interested, and why Luke picked me up on open protocols versus API access, well, actually, I'm really happy that I can be in control. I can connect directly with all of my service providers, and I can route that information how I want to route it. And they're not necessarily interconnecting between them and having data policies that I'm not aware of. And once we get into this mode of thinking, things get really interesting with contracts. I'm not necessarily talking about smart contracts. I'm just talking about just how I contract with other people and how I keep track of all of those contracts, because those are just lists of objects that are contracts, you know, that I can manage them. Yeah. Am I going on? Is this useful?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I'm going to have to drop out now. Sorry about that.
Okay.
It's nice to see you all, and I'll definitely watch the recording, and I might be back. And if you're still here when I get back, that'd be great.
Nice one, George.
Take
Take
care.
care. See you
Bye.
now. Bye. I'm going to go on to some work that we did with Liam, who is actually in this call. Liam has an organization called CultureBanked, and we worked with an artist to build a database of his works. And because what we wanted to show was, well, that it would be easy to let artists tidy up their metadata around their works. And because I think it's fair to say an artist is concentrating on creativity. And it's much the same in the music industry. Again, it's like metadata and all of that kind of admin-y side of things is the last things that creatives should want to think about. But if we can make it easy, then it means that they will not miss so many revenue opportunities because they'll be able to capitalize on their art. And that's an important part of this. So again, this is really just showing you we can have objects and we can list objects and we can edit objects. And this is just a work of art. And we can talk about metadata about that object, and we can, you know, in this particular, I'm just going to mess with this because it's a local example data set. I can add additional, okay, there aren't any additional owners there, but I can add other owners. I can change who the beneficiaries of the work are. And I can add marketing platforms or remove marketing platforms. So there's, and because this interface is in my control, I can potentially add more sections. So if this was designed for me by a developer, if this app was designed, I would have to go back to that developer and say, please, could you add in another section that talked about location or color or medium or how I want to collaboratively whatever with other people. But this way, this is like, how can we build tools to enable people to rapidly self-organize, and self-organize in the individual sense or in the collaborative sense. So that's a big part of what we're doing here. And I think lastly, I'm just going to show you a screen that says, actually, this doesn't even say DDEX, but believe you me, this is something that would have been a DDEX. Look, there you go. There's a form that is talking about DDEX metadata, and I can fill it in, and but we need to work on it, and we need to work on it with partners who are in the music industry, and we've got a few lining up to do that. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Unless, does anyone have any particular things they want to ask about what they just saw, or should we just go to a more general discussion?
No, that's cool.
Okay, cool.
Just a quick clarifying question. These are all more or less alive and in use, or sort of clarify maybe the kind of active status of any
Yeah.
or all. Thanks.
Yeah, Charles. So they are, I'd actually say they're not in use as such. They're all demonstrations. And to be very honest, I'm really happy with that. I don't actually want us to have real users at this stage, but what I do want is real collaborators, real partners, so that we can work with them to build a more robust version of what you're seeing there. Because, you know, truth be known, we're kind of building these very rapidly, and we're at this stage we are not necessarily concentrating on aspects of privacy and security that should be really finalized before we actually put this out to the masses. So this is not about going big now. This is about getting people together who align with the task, be they service providers out there who are wanting to promote a world where individuals have more autonomy and more power, and that could be, and I'm when I say individuals, I'm also talking about groups of individuals, and that group could be a record label, or a group of managers, or a healthcare service, or whatever. It's not us versus them situation. It's very much about giving people autonomy, whether in groups or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thanks. Helpful.
So do your worst. Yeah.
Where do you think sort of the main bulk of the work is needed? Sort of integrating specific APIs, the mapping between them, the APIs, or the sort of core functionality of the app itself?
Okay, so it's a really good question. And just imagine you were building Facebook, or you were building an operating system, or just all of those things. And technically, we're having to work at multiple levels. So we're working in the actual TypeScript Angular code base. We're working in the flow base, and each of those have issues that we're encountering. And then sort of like in another dimension, it's about how philosophically, we're not building this in a lab. We're not saying, let's get some really intelligent people to build something and then we'll take it out to the world. What we're doing is we're saying the really intelligent people are our collaborators and partners, the people with needs, the people who really are going to use this stuff. We're building it for them, with them. And so that in a sense, it's not just a technical play here. It's a technical plus collaboration play, because it's not purely one or the other. But I'll dive into a little bit more right now, because I think you were quite specific with what you're saying. Just we need to look at how we build, ultimately how we build the interface for the user, and it's probably multiple levels of like abstraction, so that the user ultimately can decide exactly how it's going to look. But there is also a layer behind that sort of describes semantically what's going on within that screen. And then behind that, it's more like, well, what data is available? What capabilities does the API have that you're working with? And the APIs might be local, or it might be to another app, or it might be that's local, or it might be something that's remote. And do I want to take a copy and store locally all of the data that I'm working with remotely? You know, what are the capabilities of my local machine? Do I want to back it up to a place of my choosing? You know, do I have multiple devices all kind of like working together? So it's huge. and I think the way we're approaching it is to be driven by our partners. I think that makes sense, because that's how we're going to be able to roll this out. They're going to be the adopters, you know, and some we're working with more closely than others. So for instance, like, for example, Bandsintown, really, that, you know, we've ticked the boxes to, as a developer, to be allowed to have an API key so that we can run our app against their API. And there may be more involvement than that. I hope there is, but at this stage there isn't. Whereas with other projects we're working with, or for example, Liam is sitting in this call. So, you know, other partners and collaborators are involved to a lesser or greater degree. You know, I'm really happy for you to ask more specific questions, because yeah, that sent me off on a very generalized answer. But if you want to have a specific answer about a technology, I'm really happy to do that too. Donald, do you need to unmute? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you need to turn up your volume then.
No, can't hear you. But I can lip read you saying, "Can you hear me now?"
Okay, he'll type something. Okay, cool.
I could throw in a question about just what would be the ideal experiments, or what sort of, is it, or a range or a spectrum of types of experiment?
Yeah. Everything. So what we seem to be doing quite a bit at the moment is copying the metaphors of what currently exists out there. So we're building, I quite like it actually, we're calling things Kendraio Player, you know, and that, oh, by the way, I haven't shown you that, but that's like a player app that would plug into multiple service providers. So again, aggregating. So again, I can be in control of my playlists. It's not all hosted on someone else's service. We also got something called Kendraio Pay. Why can't we plug in all the payment ways of paying for things into one place, so the users and the shop can decide how they want to do that? And those things exist already to lesser or greater degree. So in some cases, yeah, it's reinventing the wheel, but it's interesting looking at what are the little things that Kendraio adds when you start doing it, where the user actually is managing that interface. But I think, just to answer your question, Charles, it actually doesn't matter so much what the thing is. What it matters more is that the people that we're working with are passionate, are interested, are in it for the long journey, are committed, and I guess they have a problem that is real, in the sense of there are going to be people that want to beta test it, alpha test it, beta test it, and then use it. And so the idea is to kind of like roll this out, not with some big launch, but by just seeding it through partners. And now I'm going to look at what, okay, so Luke, can you summarize what?
So Donald asked, is there a particular reason that we chose
Angular?
And I was just explaining it was a quick prototype that was done, and I don't think we were really attached to it at all. It's just yeah, it was possible to build on a template system, and it was a straightforward thing. Yeah.
I'll tell you why, actually, literally, is we were thinking about what should we use, Angular, React, or whatever. And it was just the fact that we were being funded by a European project at the time called Blumen, and one of the bigger organizations in it decided to use Angular, and we thought we would do too. And that was we really didn't, it was really about choosing something. Yeah, and like Luke says, we're not necessarily tied to it. I think there's a, hopefully the things that we're building are going to be portable. So really, when it comes, there's a number of layers to it. There's the actual, the engine of the low code, no code system. And then there's the actual representation of the flows as JSON configuration. And then there's, the way it's all displayed. And I think you could say that ultimately it comes down to the thing that we're really creating in the end will be the representation of the flows, perhaps. But actually, yes, that is true. But actually, it's a whole ecosystem, because there's and we might have different clients. And in some sense, we're just building a reference implementation of this kind of environment. And I suppose the standard will be the way that you represent a flow or a mini app within the ecosystem. But I suspect it's going to be a lot more than that in terms of what is the development environment for these flows and apps, and how do we make that develop environment be as easy as possible for people to use, as if it was an Excel spreadsheet that they're throwing around at their friends, just like, I've done this Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to email it to you, please add what you want to it, send it back, and that I've been thinking about Excel spreadsheets, because it's a good metaphor, because these things don't need me to go to an app store to publish it. I can send it to you really easily, and there's a lot of freedom in that. So if we can build on that kind of model,
can I quickly jump in on that? I'll come on camera a little bit. Just that one image about the spreadsheet. Just to clarify, I think if I understand, it's a real-time collaboration. It's not a sending a file back and forth type of metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the options and the opportunity here to do things multiple ways. So what you saw with the workflow cloud is kind of real time, but actually, if I make a change and I want to upload it, I have to do that. I literally have to say, upload the change that I've made to the cloud, and then the person I'm working with can download it. But actually, we want to take that even further so that we can in real time be manipulating these, like as if it was a Word doc, as if it was not Word doc, as if it was a Google doc or a Google sheet, so you could in real time manipulate these things, but also I would have my version here and you would have your version there. And there's multiple ways of doing this. And then, the slower way is I can send it via email. And the nice thing about it is they will all be compatible with the environment. And I think that's very important. And we can do this because we are not trying to charge people for anything. We're not trying to silo their data. We're not trying to grab them into a system that restricts them. So what we're trying to do is give them multiple opportunities to create as much as possible, and by building an environment that can operate in multiple ways.
So is this social media for assets and data?
Kind of sounds like you might be right, but when we think of social media these days, it might be colored in the wrong way. And I would like to think that this was social media done in a way that I'm in control of what I post. I'm in control of where it goes. I'm in control of what I see. I'm in control of the algorithm. I'm in control of my news feed. I can filter things how I want, and I can store copies of things that I literally will own forever, and no one can take that away from me. What I'm noticing a lot recently, actually, is a lot of services that I was kind of relying on are sunsetting, and just like service providers just willy-nilly saying, we're going to switch this off. We're not going to do that anymore. And it's like, wow. And when I think about like the potential of what we're building, it's like, we won't need to do that anymore. Yeah, rug pulling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is fascinating and scary all at the same time. Okay. How's that for an update? Any further questions, or should we just sleep on that and leave it there and meet another day?
There was, oh, go ahead.
No, you go on.
I have just a quick thing. It was just a phrase that jumped out a little earlier. You said something, you're working in the code base and the flow base.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I love this phrase flow base, and if you can elaborate at all, it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, actually, I think that's the first time I might have said that, but as in, the area of, so in the code base, there's an environment, we're doing it on GitHub. That's where it's stored, and GitHub has very good tools for collaboration and management of versions, and it's awesome. And we want and need to have it, if not the same, if not better, management tools for building flows that are equally collaborative, but perhaps. And that's the wonderful thing about Git, is that it's not necessarily centralized like GitHub is, but so there's lots of opportunities to either use Git itself or to riff on that theme. But that's a nice thing about what we're building in total, actually, that probably none of what we're actually building is new, and that there's so many metaphors out there, the low code, no code, the interface elements, all of this stuff there's a lot of people that have done a lot of work that's really cool on all of this stuff, but they haven't necessarily, I don't think they've combined it in the same way that we're combining it. So we're not, I guess what I'm saying is we're not starting from a place without really useful, robust patterns already been built. Guy, you had a...
I probably should know the answer, but I can't remember. Have you got an ability to have a flow of other flows? So if you have one for PRS, one for PPL, and one for Spotify, can you do like a release that would combine those three flows in one?
The idea would be yes, and in some cases, I mean, we definitely have a way of nesting flows, and whether at the moment flows seem pretty linear in the way that they're represented, and you can have nested flows within them. However, we may want to do something that's looks much more like a Moog, that you can much more of a patch bay, much more agent-like, we've been talking about those kind of things, and maybe they're more responsive than so. And there are limitations with the way that we've been building it in Angular that Luke will attest to, I'm sure, in terms of I just saw Donald's comment, excellent synth knowledge. Yeah. I am a musician. So sorry, I just forgot what you said. What was that?
No, dashboard for flows for
yeah. So I think there's loads of ways that this could be. I think we're really we're pre-alpha. There's so much exploration that we can do on representations of these things, and like you say, Charles, Yahoo pipes, and there's so much that has been built already to do these kind of things. I think we're perhaps, I'm a bit cautious about implementing too much too quickly, and I really want to build up the relationships that we have with these collaborators and partners, because I feel they're so important for us to be relevant, and I feel that they can carry us. We're a small team at the moment. We do need to grow, but they will be able to support us and carry us as we go forward. But there's so many, there's mind-blowing stuff, I think, especially when you consider about like semantic interfaces, the meaning of the interfaces, and yeah. Cool.
I can't resist. I'm wondering if you have a quick answer, because it's a rabbit hole, in regard to AI and how that might relate to language models and prompts and so forth. I can't help myself. Sorry.
Cool. I think obviously the recent go-to technologies have been blockchain, crypto, AI, and then it was soon, well, we don't know if it's going to peter out like VR, AR, and we don't know if that's going to work or not, but and what kind of world we're building with that. But yes, so AI, I think as with blockchain and crypto, I think there's a place for it, and that might slap people that think AI is the answer. But I think what I'm really interested in, I think what we're interested in doing here is an interface for users, for real human beings. And it's really important that we look at what we're doing, and does it empower people or does it disempower people? Does it make people feel that they are part of the world or not part of the world? Does it make people take responsibility for what they're doing, or does it this is a potentially a long answer, but I think there are bigger things that we're trying to do with Kendraio about influencing the way the world is going, and that is by giving people the tools to create. And when we give people the tools to create, hopefully they take a bit more responsibility about what they're doing, and they also understand that they can be empowered, and they can dream, and they can have the world that they want to have. And I think AI has a part of that. And to get really specific, I think what we're noticing about AI, you can talk a lot about it, but it's machines dreaming. They don't necessarily know whether what they're saying is really what we would think of as true or not. They are attempting to behave like what a human would, and you can. So I think
just to ground it in Kendra, I mean, I didn't.
I think there's a place. I think there's a place for assisting. I think there's a place for being able to say what you want, and for it to be able to be created, for sure. I think we just have to be careful that we don't necessarily hand over the whole thing to an AI. And I think that's the case for all services. So I think there's definitely a place for being able to have it help us create things. Sorry, Guy.
I can't help myself. But I think AI greatest danger to, or one of the the sort of threats it puts us in, is misinformation. And misinformation greatest enemy is metadata, so the ability to verify the source of information. So having a human controlled system for producing metadata sounds to me like, it's a really good tool to have during a time where AI is increasing its capabilities. So, so being able to verify a certain piece of art, article, or any resource has come from a specific person or organization you can recognize is a really useful tool to have. So while it may need to interact with AI, if there will be APIs that, you know, expect data that would get processed later on by AI, having the ability to control the data and authenticate it and put it in the right places is, I think, the greatest power of what, or the potential that this has.
Yeah, cool. That's
beautiful. Thank you.
And I just want to put this in perspective. No matter what we say here, this tool is about empowering individuals or groups of individuals. So if they choose to do stuff with AI or blockchain or crypto or whatever, VR, AR, it's entirely up to them, and great. And I think we should facilitate all manners of ways of operating with these systems and services. And I think, yeah, that's our purpose, is to give people the choices to screw up, because it's when you screw up, then you can figure out, you know, better ways of doing it afterwards. So I think failing and failing better are like a big part of experimentation. You know, I think all of those things are really good. And we should applaud messing up more. And on that note, I'll ask if there are any final questions or comments, and then we'll leave this because this is going to be a long.
I just have to say thank you, Daniel, and I've got to go for 1 o'clock.
Cool. All right.
Really interesting. Thank you very much.
Nice one.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Great work.
Thanks all for turning up. Okay.
Thanks, Daniel.
Take care, and I'm going to stop the recording now.